Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Fire Up Michigan. And I am really fired up tonight with the crew that I happen to have. My goodness, well, George Eichhorn is back for another week. Glad to have you back, George.
Thank you. Good to be here. Thanks, Scott.
And Madman Mancini is back.
I missed you, man. It was a little bit of a rest period, but now we're back out of the penalty box. We're ready to go with it.
Oh, you never miss me, Mark. We had an incredible show on Saturday with Bruce Kessinger. And last but not least, Bill Roos. And I'm going to tell you one thing about Mr. Roos. Bill worked 16 years with the Detroit Free Press, 10 years with the Detroit Red Wings. If there's anybody that knows hockey in Michigan better than Bill Roos, I'd certainly like to find him. So, Bill, we are so glad to have you joining us tonight on Fire Up Michigan. And we have a lot to uncover tonight. Bill, thanks for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. Well, first of all, we'll get the show started on a little somber note. Unfortunately, all of Michigan, the Michigan Wolverines lost a very, very important part of their family with the passing of Garymoeller. Garymoeller died at the age of 81. No cause of death has been released, but, we all know that Garymoeller led the Detroit Lions to a 4-3 record when he replaced Bobby Ross in midseason. Not going to get into too much detail, but George, give me a brief thought on Garymoeller.
Well, I heard our friend Jim Brandstetter today, and he said it right. They asked him where would he rank. He goes, he's in the first row. So meaning that after Bo Schembechler and Lloyd Carr and Mo, Gary left under strange circumstances, of course, the U of M athletic program, but he was very much a good coach. He was linebackers coach for the Lions, and the players liked him. They enjoyed him, and as you guys know, he did not really get a chance, obviously, with Matt Millen coming on board to do anything after they failed to make the playoffs, thanks to that Edinger, I believe, field goal to end that season when Moeller was interim. But I look at him as a very good coach and a very good man who helped do a lot for that program, especially at U of M.
All right, Bill, some thoughts about Garymoeller.
Yeah, he was. I got to know him a little bit more so at the Lions because at the time I was covering them as a secondary beat writer with the Free Press. I was at the game against the Dolphins when Bobby Ross quit on the team hours after they had lost. I think they gave up 14 points without even touching the ball to start that game. And he said he doesn't coach this stuff. And next thing you know, Gary's taken over. George is right. He was a player's coach, always had been, very well respected, not only by the players and his coaching staff, but certainly by the local media. He was always accessible. He helped me with the Desmond Howard book that I did in 2011. It's sad, actually kind of funny that Matt Millen then comes in and relieves him and brings in Marty Morningwig. And if it wasn't for that transition, we never would have had the taking the coin toss in the wind in Evansville that one I think it was a November or October Sunday in 2000. So rest in peace, Gary. Always a very class man and certainly a Michigan man.
Yeah, Mark, any quick thoughts on Garymoeller before we get to the fillet of the show? Because, folks, please stay with us. We got a lot of great stuff to digest.
Well, I think Bill and George touched on it, with their experience and knowledge, being in that backyard and seeing them from a standpoint. I thought he was always a player's type of a coach. And it was sad that he didn't get an adequate chance to continue that as a head coach there in Detroit. I think when Matt Millen came in, it just, bottomed out this franchise to a certain extent. And that's just one man's opinion on it. But this guy, if he was given more of a chance there to really resurrect his coaching tree, he would have done something in Detroit.
All right. Well, all I can say is rest in peace, Garymoeller. You'll definitely be missing. I'll double up on your thought, Mark, that he should have gotten a better opportunity with the Lions than he did. But, I guess that's for us to talk about now. So we have a lot to get to, as I mentioned before. And just so we're going to go ahead and lead off with a book that Bill wrote, and that's titled 9 salute to Mr. Gordie Howe with Bob Duff. So why don't you go ahead and give everybody a little bit of information about that book, Bill?
You know, the way it started, when I switched careers and went from the Free Press to the Red Wings, the writing was a lot different, right? So you're at the Free Press, you're writing for an audience of readers and fans. When I moved over to the Wings, it was more of a marketing position, right? Your audience no longer is so much the fans. While it is some, it's also for different layers. It's for players and coaches. It's for upper management. It's for ownership. So they have a much bigger say and are bigger critics than the fans ever would be in that marketing writing. What happened when I first started, Yzerman had just retired, and January 2nd, 2007, they were having his retirement night, and they asked me to write a book, and I had just started there in September of 06. So I was like, I've never written a book in my life. But it was one of those things where, you feel comfortable in what you've always done, but there was a chance to kind of get out of that comfort zone. And I think I kind of met it head on. I got with Bob Duff, who had written some other books for the organization in the past. And so he and I got together and came up with this, what I thought was a pretty cool collaboration. He wrote out the chapters, but I didn't think it was full enough. There wasn't, it wasn't a robust book. It wasn't real thick. So I came up with the idea of reaching out to every captain in the league, and got comments and short stories, anecdotes about Steve Yzerman's, 22 plus season career with the Wings. And what I found out was, in doing that, everybody was pretty gracious with their time and in their comments about Steve as the Wings captain and leader. That night, January 2nd, it was really impressive to see how that book was selling. I mean, if you can think back at Joe Louis Arena, they had the East and West gates, and typically what would happen is they had the program booths and the podiums, and the salespeople stood up on a box and sold the magazines. Well, they didn't sell magazines that night. They sold this book for, I think it was $30 a piece, and people were buying them by the bushel. I mean, I saw people walk away with 10 of these copies, and they wanted to go back to their cars. The ushers were letting them do it because they didn't want to ruin the book. We sold almost 30,000 copies that night. And as I sat there and watched the game, I looked up at the banners, and I'm trying to think of the next project. And my boss, Mike Bayoff, came up to me and he said, well, what are you going to do next? And I looked at Gordie's banner, and I was like, we got to do Gordie now. He goes, well, here's the thing. If you do Gordie, you've got to do a TED book too. And I kind of looked at him. I was like, well, why do I have to do a TED book? He goes, you do one for one of those guys, they expect you to do it for them as well. Wow. And it worked both ways, more so with Ted than with Gordie. Ted was much more verbal and would let you know his peace of mind. Gordie, some things just kind of washed off him like water off the back of a duck.
So my question to you, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Bill, but did you get much collaboration from Gordie Howe at all? Or how much is he involved with it? Or was it one of those collective things where everybody's talking about him? Gordie didn't have a lot of input. I'm kind of wondering about that.
Yeah, it's funny you asked that question because Steve, I had more input with the first book from Steve's wife. She was the family photographer. And I remember when the book came out, we had a picture on the back cover of his family. It was him and his 3 daughters, but the wife wasn't in the picture. And so he was furious about that picture on the back. And he goes, I don't like the picture. I said, well, I think you need to pick up this fight with your wife because she was the family photographer. She took the picture. She agreed to put that on the back of the cover. So I said, Steve, really, that sounds like an issue between you and your wife and not me. I'm not going to rock that boat. I'm going to let her go with this picture. Gordie and Mark and Marty had some input. Like, and it was more like I would ask questions of them. Like the Ilitches were real skittish about using the pictures of him laying on the ice covered in blood after the Teeter Kennedy accident in the 50s.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, we don't know. That's a pretty graphic picture. I said, well, let me ask Gordie. And in Gordie's own way, I saw him up at training camp that year. I'm trying to remember when we released that book. But the previous training camp, he was there, and I said, Gordie, what do you think about using this picture? And he goes, it's effing hockey. What do you expect? Okay, Gordie, we're using the picture. And the Ilitches were fine with that. But yeah, there was probably more input from them just on do's and don'ts. Like we had a game puck that we had from his game at the Palace when he skated with the Detroit Vipers.
Right.
Oh yeah.
And they insisted that my graphic guy trim out the word Detroit Viper.
Oh,
Didn't want it. And then I'm like, well, are we gonna have a problem here with the Hartford Whalers?
yeah.
Oh no, that's fine. But if you know the relationship back then, at least between the Davidsons and the Ilitches, it was the Palace versus Joe Louis Arena, and it was oil and water. It was really, really bad and contentious. So they wanted nothing to do with promoting them, admitting that he even ever played up there. But he was like your grandfather, just talking to this guy. I had a great office at the Joe. I was literally directly across the hallway in the Zamboni pit from the referee's room. George, I don't know if you were ever in there, but
No, I wasn't. No.
And it was a great spot for 10 years. And he would come down there on any given day with Felix Gatt, which was a longtime friend of his, and he'd come in there with that little dog of his, Rocket, and Rocket had not much fur left on its little body because Rocket had to be 12 or 13 years old, and that damn dog would just sit there and shiver from the cold conditions inside Joe Louis Arena. But he would just sit there and tell stories, and it was so much fun. The secondary piece of that book is that after using the Yzerman model, I decided I wanted to try to get every living Hall of Famer to comment about Gordie. And I'll tell you what, between myself and a couple interns that I had at the time, we reached all but three. Ken Dryden was one that didn't talk to us. Teeter Kennedy was sick at the time. And Jacques Lemaire was another one. Now, I think there was some issue between Jacques and Gordie that I never got to the bottom of. But he would not talk about him. Even Bob Gainey, who at the time had just lost his daughter to that horrible accident off the coast, I think it was the coast of Florida. I think the boat capsized or she fell overboard and they never recovered her. Even Bob, in his, this is only like 6 months after this had happened. When I reached him, he was still in mourning. And to his credit, he called me back a couple weeks later and gave me a prepared statement about playing in the All-Star game in 1980 with Gordie. And I obviously still thank him for doing that, knowing what he had been going through. But to hear stories from Stan Mikita and Phil Esposito and Bobby Orr, and just priceless stuff. And at some point, I'll release, I think, some of these recordings that I have from these guys, because it's just absolutely mind-blowing and priceless.
Well, unbelievable. So what I want you to do, Bill, as well, we're on this subject because I have a lot more to get to. Let everybody know how they can go ahead and get their hands on this book.
The books are still on Amazon and eBay. I have seen them on a couple other bookstore websites. Any of the 9 books that I've done for the organization are still out there and available.
Very good. So just so you know, this is Fire Up Michigan. My name is Scott Morgenroth, Motor City Madmouth, along with George Icor, Madman Mancini, Bill Roos. really glad that you can join us tonight here. And so as we talk about a lot of the different parts of the Red Wings, I do want to let everybody know in just a moment how they can find us. But, obviously we're talking about an original six team, which is really, really important. So I think it's important knowing that the Red Wings made the playoffs for 25 straight years, that the NHL needs the Red Wings to be good. Just ask ESPN, Fox, and NBC, because they have won more Stanley Cups for an American-based team, 11. So when I talk about the Red Wings per se, and you talk about the respective leagues needing certain teams to be good, the first one that comes to mind are the Green Bay Packers in the NFL. Some people might say the Dallas Cowboys are more drama to me than they are relevant. Sorry, Cowboys fans. But Stephen A. Smith would probably have a hard time debating me on that because he hammers you anyways. But NBA needs the Boston Celtics and the LA Lakers to be relevant. And MLB needs the Yankees and the Dodgers. And, obviously I mentioned the original six theme. So you talk about the fact that the Red Wings, even in the rebuilding moment, building off the original six model, make more national TV appearances than the Florida Panthers during a very good President's Cup year for them. So with that said, okay, we'll go back to you, Bill. You're the Red Wings writer. Does the NHL need the Red Wings to be good to increase their popularity? Because we all know full well that they're 25 years in a row in the playoffs, which is something I don't think will ever be duplicated anyways. But the NHL needs the Red Wings to be contenders, and they need them in the playoffs. I mean, I realize you have other stars, but the Red Wings are a premier original six team.
Certainly from the market, they need them. I mean, the hockey market is much more vibrant and fruitful than it is in South Florida. So I would definitely say that the league needs the Red Wings more than they need Carolina and Florida. You look at Toronto the same way, right? I mean, they're the epicenter of global hockey, arguably, and they've been putzing around since 1967. So, without winning a cup, does the league need the Red Wings? Yeah, they need them to be successful. Do they need them to win cups? No. I don't think they necessarily want the Wings to go off like they did between 97 and 08. It's all about parity in this league, and I think Gary Bettman's getting that right now.
Yeah, well, obviously, Hockey Town is what it is. And Mark, you being a national guy out in the Los Angeles area and you move around. So, we talked about success. What do you think, Mark? Does the NHL need the Red Wings to be in the Stanley Cup year in and year out, and as well as on national TV?
Well, I'm loaded up with a few questions, but let me answer that first one. And I throw Montreal in that. I think the league needs Montreal to be a prominent figure in this too. Bill's brought up Toronto and Detroit, but when I look at the Red Wings, and it's a proud franchise, but you might want to look at Colorado, who's been prominent with Detroit. They've kind of run hand in hand, and we haven't seen this in major sports. Maybe the Dodgers and the Giants, where they've had brawls, but nothing can top the Avalanche and Red Wing battles over the years. And that's must-see TV when you got Patrick Waugh and, Osgood tangling up there. So I think that's what we need is if you want to get the Red Wings are prominent, you got to bring the Colorado Avalanche to the East.
Good point. Glad you brought that.
And certainly the E60 story on ESPN has brought that back to light, certainly for a new generation of hockey fans that know nothing about that rivalry and how it started. Everyone believes that it's March 26, 1997, between the two combatants, but they don't know the history with Chris Draper and Igor Larionov and Kozlov, who kind of started that entire situation in that particular series. So, it's a new time. It's a forgotten rivalry at times, but I think that ESPN's put a new spin on it, and I think some people are starting to catch on. It was fun to watch Twitter, particularly during the finals here, where Red Wing fans were like, there's no way and no chance, snowball's chance in hell that I'm going to root for the Avalanche over Tampa Bay. And to me, I'm like, well, geez, I have no problem watching Darren Helm win his second cup. But yeah, some people are like, no, I don't care if it's Darren Helm or not. I'm not going to root for Colorado. But it happened so long ago. This isn't like it just happened last year or last month. So I think sometimes it just has to die. You know, I would hate for somebody just to start something just to keep this rivalry going, and, you know, because some fans want to see a fight. It doesn't make any sense. One thing I did want to mention when it comes to the Original Six and the league needing certain teams, look what Chicago's doing right now. I mean, Chicago, you know, won 3 cups in this decade, and they are just tearing this team apart right now. And you know, they're a huge hockey market. They're a huge sports market. So see how fast they can turn this thing around. You know, again, on Twitter, it looks like people think they're tanking to get the #1 pick next year. That does the league no good if that's the perception and people actually think that that's what's going to happen. But they don't want to go into a rebuild like the Red Wings or the Buffalo Sabres. But we'll see.
All right.
I think the league needs the Red Wings, but the league also needs Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, the Rangers, a lot of teams, not just the Red Wings.
Correct.
Yeah, in a moment I'll bring on a station break here. I want to make sure that everybody knows how that they can go ahead and find us. But with that said, okay, we talk about the fact that, all right, continue your thought about that, George, and we'll go to a station break.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, Gary Bettman has been no fan of Detroit. Okay, let's just be honest. Let's call a spade a spade. That man is despised. My good Red Wing fan, Julie, calls him the Snake. He sucks up to Mario Lemieux and the Penguins and Crosby. And I don't think Gary could care less. I shouldn't say it that way. Yeah, he'd like to see the Red Wings make the playoffs, but I agree with Bill. I don't think he wants to see Detroit get in a Stanley Cup. He hated Joe Louis Arena. Let's be honest. I mean, the press box was an afterthought. The hotel rooms were hard to find. The city had a terrible crime rate. So I'm sure they weren't happy about playing the playoffs in Detroit. But that being said, the Red Wings outsmarted them. They went out and got the talent. Give credit to Devellano, Illich, and Kenny Howlett. And, you know, they outsmarted the NHL. And like you guys said, 25 years is not going to be repeated. But I agree with you, Scott. They still are on national TV, and that is a sign of respect when they get more games than some of the other teams. Don't forget, there's a heavy diet of Washington, Boston, the Rangers, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh. I mean, that they love the East Coast teams too, the national networks.
Well, it's that East Coast influence, right? And we talk about that every year with every sport.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, regardless of what Gary Bettman wants, the TV ratings don't lie. So let me just go to that station break, okay? Just to let you know how to find the show. You can subscribe to the South Florida Tribune on our YouTube channel. So please subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. Have lots of great shows. Or you can visit www.southfloridatribune.com and follow us on Twitter at Tribune South. To advertise, call 954-304-4941. The audio portion of the show can be heard on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And there are lots of places out there to do it. So please subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. Have lots of great things working. So with that said, okay, Bettman or no Bettman, okay, the ratings don't lie. And I know Mark Mancini would like to get a piece of this action. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, you know, and I think, you know, George brings up an interesting point here, but, you know, when I look at the Red Wings, they got their wish to go in the East to be a part of that Toronto Maple Leaf battle. And if they could ask Gary Bettman for something else, I'm sure they'd like to bring the Chicago Blackhawks over to the East. When, you know, this is the screwed up thing about when I look at the NBA and the NHL guys, you've got Chicago and Detroit in basketball that's in part of the East, but in hockey, you don't see that. And why is that not? Because that would be the ideal thing. And the only thing it is I think when you look at the West, is the only thing that's saving the West right now is having the Chicago Blackhawks over there. Otherwise, you'd have all the premier teams in the East.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you, Mark. I think all original six teams should be definitely in the Eastern Conference and keep them all there because the rivalries are a big part of the sport for sure. So, with that said, some recent moves the Red Wings made is I believe that Steve Yzerman fleeced the St. Louis Blues when they brought in Ville Husso, who's joining the Red Wings, but they get a third-round pick for him, and that's about it. Re-signed the guy, so go figure. And of course, we all know that Steve Yzerman knows how to go out there and fleece teams. And of course, George alluded to it, that they did it to the Carolina Panthers when they got the other goaltender, Bill Nedeljkovic, I believe his name is.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a good, solid goaltending tandem for sure. So with that said, all right, let's talk about Bill. Okay, how far do you think the Red Wings are away from being a playoff team?
Well, so I left them after the 15-16 season. It's the same year that Datsuk left, right, and left cap space, a cap hit in their pocket. Figured then it was going to be about a 5-year rebuild, but then when Steve came in, and I know this from folks that still work there, he was quite upset when he found out that the cupboard was barer than what he originally thought. So that 5 years now, I think is obviously a lot longer. And again, it depends on how quickly these guys develop. Does Suter and Raymond, do they have some type of sophomore jinx? How well do they handle their second year? People now know who they are. They were in the top. Obviously one wins the Rookie of the Year award. The other one was in the top 4 in voting. So they're not sneaking up on anybody. They've got an upgrade in goaltending with Husso coming in to replace Grice. Both goalies are 26 and 27 years old. So it all works from that back end, right? And how quickly can they start upgrading that defense? Who do they bring in as a second pair, as a third pair? Does the Evertson kid come in and make a statement this year? I would anticipate to see him play in a first or second pair this year with the team. So we'll see. I still think they're 2 or 3 years out for contending for a Stanley Cup. Do they make the playoffs this year? That's not good enough. Even if they do, we'll see. But it depends on how quickly these guys develop. I was encouraged to see Marco Kasper the last couple of days in video. This kid is lightning fast, and like Steve said, he can play all 3 forward spots. They like his size, and they love the intangible. They love and they've seen him a lot because he played with Mo Seider in Europe. So it's not like they didn't know much about this kid when they drafted him. They love the intangibles, and Yzerman even said, I think on Thursday night, that there's these unknown intangibles, right? That some scouts weren't aware of what this kid had. So I think they did their homework really well on this guy, and time will tell. He might come up quicker than any of these other guys. So we'll see.
Go ahead, Mark.
It's a 2-part question. And when I look at Sergei Federov, he kind of reminded me of Guy Lafleur, the flower in Montreal, the speed and everything. And the other part of this question is, why haven't the Detroit Red Wings gone out and got somebody like a Barry Trotz, who's defense first, that would build teams like he built Nashville, the Capitals, the Islanders? What's the reason they haven't gone after a coach like that in your mind in the Lafleur Federov thing?
Yeah, if you look at who Steve has hired in the past, he hasn't hired veteran coaches. He's hired first-time guys.
Mm-hmm.
John Cooper was a first-time guy. He's stuck with Blashill, who was a first-time guy. So Lalone is a first-time guy. who he has some history with, not just in Tampa. Lalonde was with Toledo for a while, and they were a Detroit affiliate franchise, and he used to come up to training camp. So the organization knows him, whether if it wasn't Steve, it's certainly Draper and Maltby and some of the other guys that are still with the organization. They know him well. So, I just think he wants to ride with the unknown first-time guys, whether the reason is giving them a chance and an opportunity, or there's just something that he sees in them. Are they the player coaches? Are they communicators? That's been the big thing here in town. Is Lalonde is a communicator, right? He's going to talk to his players. He's not Mike Babcock, who wouldn't talk to his players. Trust me, he didn't talk to his players. And when he did, it wasn't very nice. So I think Lalonde is in that cookie cutter type process and personality that Steve's looking for. And the time will tell whether or not he made the right decision. I think this is the guy, though. If the Wings make the playoffs and the Wings start contending, this guy will be coaching at that time. I don't think Lalonde is. I don't think he's here just for the short haul, and then he's going to broom him and bring in a Barry Trotz or somebody else to lead them to the promised land. I think he's going to ride this horse.
Great point. So now I'm going to ask everybody about Derek Lalonde. Okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, Bill, that you're telling me that you feel that Derek Lalonde is the right guy for this job.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What about you, George?
I don't know. I don't know enough about him. Yeah, he's been a good coach in the minors. He's been an assistant coach. So I tend to trust Steve Yzerman. I think a lot of the fans are behind most of the things that Stevie Y does and has done so far in the few short years he's been here. So I have to put my trust in him. Mark, I thought the same thing you did. All these veteran coaches that were available. And, but like Bill said, there's something he sees in him and the experiences that he's had with him in Tampa Bay and in the Toledo and other organizations he's been with. And I trust Stevie on this, at least give him the benefit of the doubt.
Well, I think another thing that should be pointed out too, obviously, is Derek Lalonde has been in Tampa for a while, learning under John Cooper. So to say that we've heard the Patriot way, now we could call it the Lightning way. So I think that's putting it up very, very loosely, that maybe the Lightning way can work with the Red Wings, because after all, Steve Yzerman, I believe, hired Derek Lalonde in the first place as an assistant coach there. So if the familiarity factor comes into play, then perhaps that's probably why he held out as long as he did during the coaching search before he interviewed and then subsequently hired him. Bill, do you find that that's pretty close to
100%. I think the minute the finals started and he still hadn't gone out and signed one of these veteran coaches, I had a feeling it was either going to be Lalonde or Halpin. That was my opinion. Those were the two assistants in Tampa. Those were the two guys that he knew the most. My understanding is he did interview Barry Trotz when he was available, but Barry interviewed at a couple other places too. And if he wasn't going to go to Winnipeg back home, I don't think he was going to go anywhere, and that seemed to kind of play out.
Interesting point. So, all right, now that we're talking about that, Bill, I know we talked about Jeffblashill. You've predicted he's going to land with the Tampa Bay Lightning, don't you?
I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he does. Him and Cooper have a phenomenal relationship that goes back years. I know every summer they get together and their families know one another. They golf together. I would not be a bit surprised if he's the coach to be named later in this transaction that brought Derek up here to Detroit. So we'll see.
So now on draft night, ESPN's Emily Kaplan was speaking to Steve Yzerman, talking about the rebuild. And you worked around Steve and been around him long enough, and he didn't tip his hand in his third year. So you talk about the ultimate poker face. Emily didn't get anything out of him. Then again, is it any surprise that she didn't get anything out of him because you local guys aren't getting anything out of him? She's a new kid on the block trying to get something out of Steve Yzerman. And good luck, Emily. Okay,
good luck. Exactly. Good luck getting anything out of Steve Yzerman or Jim Harbaugh.
And one thing I think about too, Bill, and you know this, you remember Kenny Howland would always sit, Scott, in the media center, and Kenny Howland was accessible to anybody. Yep. If Teddy Colfin or Helene St. James had a little sidebar question for him, he took it. You will never find Steve Yzerman sitting in that media dining room with us. Never.
Well,
that's not his style.
Well, when I was in Sunrise, Florida, covering a lot of the Red Wings game over at Florida Live
That's
Arena.
Different. He's on the road. I'm talking about at home.
Yeah, but I'm talking about on the road. Ken Holland always made those trips, George.
Oh, I'm sorry. I agree with
you. They both do. Yeah, they both make those trips. But like you said, Kenny's always going to be accessible regardless. He was always accessible to national media, out-of-town media. Yeah. That's just Kenny's style. Kenny's much more of a warm and fuzzy type personality. Steve's calculated. Steve, he doesn't want to say something and have somebody run with it because he doesn't want to have to answer to it later. Just two different managerial styles.
Yes.
All right, Mark.
We were talking about Gordie Howe and how instrumental he was to Detroit. I think he was instrumental to Hartford too. But when you've seen the league, and I know George and Bill, you've covered it for quite a few years, and Scott, and looking at it from how it's existed from the original six to where it is now, I think you got to look at two prominent guys here. Not only what Gordie Howe has done and laid the foundation down, but what Wayne Gretzky has done and railroaded it out here on the West Coast and broadened it. I think out of the four major sports, hockey is the most. If they get that situation in Arizona situated with the Coyotes, I think hockey is probably out of the four major sports would be the most solid one across the board. Any thought to that, guys?
I don't know. I think that I think hockey's got so much tradition. Obviously, the tradition. Right. And we talked about earlier the original six, and you guys all know that means so much to the sport. And the fact that you're crossing over into another country, and they are so rabid. Obviously, hockey is the national sport in Canada. So, Madman, I can see that to some extent, but I wouldn't say hockey's number one. Hockey has always been number four as far as viewers of the major four. And that's because some people label it a regional sport. And Bill and Scott, you know that from way back when the league, it first expanded. I mean, but what a big move it was from going from 6 to 12. But the fact is that hockey still has a solid base. I don't agree with the term regional sport. It is a national sport. And I compliment the commissioners who have expanded it into the South and into the West. I think it's been great for the sport to do that. Florida, Texas, Atlanta, they tried twice, didn't work out. Of course, Arizona and California. But you know what? I still think that hockey is number one, especially in the hearts of so many people, especially in Detroit. A lot of people put the Red Wings even above the Lions and Tigers.
Well, the only thing I'll say about that is number one, okay, the Stanley Cup, I think, is the toughest championship to win because of the physicality and the brutal way it's done. Now, let's look at it from a business standpoint, okay? And that's this. Yes, hockey has tradition, no doubt. But their salary cap, as I last read, was $83.5 million, and their TV contracts have been substandard. I think they did all right with TBS, ABC, ESPN this year. But to me, if we're trying to prioritize sports, I believe you put MLB and the NFL at the top, college football right there. The NBA, unfortunately, I think is regressing because of the drama. And I love watching the NHL, and don't sleep on NASCAR and Major League Soccer. So, I think to me, the NHL has a long way to go. And until they're able to, you look at some of the players getting paid in other sports, $25, $30 million. How do you, $30 million in the NHL goes a long way compared to what that is for a particular player on a particular roster with a particular sport. Bill, some thoughts about what I just mentioned?
I remember reading a story. I was with the Wings at the time, and we were on the road, and there was a story somewhere. I don't know if we were out in California or Arizona. I think it was California. And the Staples Center at the time had just had the esports world championships in the building, and they sold out. I don't know what capacity is, 20-some thousand, right, in Staples. And they sold out, and they talked in this story about the future of esports, and that at some point in the near future, it was going to pass the NHL in popularity, revenue, TV revenue. In Blashill and I just kind of looked at each other and he goes, I won't be a bit surprised if we keep going the way we're going, that some other sport like esports is going to pass us.
I've actually had shows on esports with other people in the past, and those opinions have been consistent. So,
I'll tell you what, though, esports, don't sleep on it, because the MHSA, the Michigan High School Athletic Association, is looking at the possibility of making that a sponsored sport here in the state. And I know there are schools like De La Salle Collegiate and Warren have an esports center in the building. And there are certain leagues in our region, in Metro Detroit, that have high school esports leagues. So don't sleep on them. It's a new thing, and it's attracting the younger generation, and those are the kids that are sitting home spinning around the keyboards faster than we ever have, but they're using it to play esports games.
All right, so I want to get to a few other topics, and I think time is allowing us to do that, so we're going to definitely touch on them now. All right, Sergei Federov, does his number ever get retired, Bill Roos?
No. Not as long as the Ilitches own the organization.
Okay.
And that's a loyalty thing.
Okay. George?
I would say as long as Marion's alive, but Bill's closer to the situation than I am. I always thought that as long as she's around, they're never going to do it. But I hope I'm right and Bill's wrong. But they're going to make him wait. It looks like.
Yep.
He deserves it. He deserves it.
Mark, do you have any thoughts about this?
Well, I think he does deserve it, like George said. I mean, he's the epitome of that, city as far as I'm concerned. You can throw Yzerman in there and a few others, but yeah, I mean, he does deserve it. And when you look at what he's done for that city, it's just amazing.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I can say is if it hadn't been done by now, who knows when. I hate to say the word burning your bridges, but it's exactly when he did, when he tried a couple of exit strategies. I know it would be a popular decision. First, it was Carolina, then subsequently Anaheim. Is that correct, Bill? And then ultimately, yep. I don't think he's been able to really totally recover, and I think it might be more of an Ilitch thing. And I don't see the Ilitches dealing out the Wings anytime soon. So that
the time when it was appropriate to retire his number is when he went into the Hockey Hall of Fame, and they brought him back here to town a week or so after the Toronto ceremony, and it was him and Lindstrom, and that would have been the perfect time to do this on a Tuesday night against some low performing team, whether it was Phoenix or Columbus or whatever. Do that on a Tuesday, sell the place out, and raise his jersey number to the rafters, but they chose not to do it. And like George says, I think Marion is a big player in this, but Chris is much, to me, I think Chris is much more like his mom than he is about being his dad. So I as long as the Ilitches own the team, I really don't see it. Will I be surprised? No, if they do it and they succumb to the fans' desires to see this happen, and they see an opportunity to sell the place out, I won't be a bit surprised, but I just think they've dug their heels in and that they have no intentions on doing it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's obviously a popular topic that people on the outside wonder about. The guy was an intricate part of Stanley Cup championships. We all know about his Russian connection as well. And we know that Keith gave, a guy who you've worked with before. Yep. And I've worked with Keith, one of the nicest people I've ever seen. We all talk about the Russian Five. Won't have time to get into that tonight, but we know that having the ability to recruit Russian players and bring them over here, I think the biggest thing it's too bad it never happened, was seeing Vladislav Tretiak never make it to the NHL. Makes you wonder a little bit if you're a hockey historian. What a shame. And I think from what I had heard at one point, the Red Wings were interested in him another lifetime ago, but that's something that I'm throwing out there. So with that said, okay, a couple other things I want to touch base on, Bill, and that's this. Do you obviously feel that the Red Wings will get an All-Star game in the new building?
I certainly would hope so. I mean, it's a beautiful building. I've been there a handful of times. There's not a bad seat in that place to watch a game, but they haven't had a draft. They haven't had they've never had. Well, they did have a draft, but that was well before it was ever televised. They had the 1980 All-Star game, and other teams have had multiple All-Star games by now. I certainly thought that they would have had one by now, but does that go to what George was saying about Bettman's disdain for this organization and this city? I don't know. The NFL's coming here with the draft in 2014 or 2024? It's coming soon. So it would be great to see on the heels of an event like that for them to come to town and show this city some love.
I agree. I think it's overdue. I don't know if it was Bettman or was it the NBA commissioner when when Little Caesars Arena opened. I think it was when the Pistons moved there. He said that they probably would be more successful in getting the All-Star game when the whole Detroit district is built up more. Do you remember that statement, Bill?
A little bit. Yeah.
I think it was I'm thinking it might have been Silver, maybe, not Bettman, that said that. That being said, it's a big process. You guys know this. I mean, Dave Beach now and Marty Dobeck of the Detroit Sports Commission, and you got to get everybody lined up. Mark Hollis is involved now. I mean, it's a big thing, to get any of those big events here. Plus, the team ownership's got to be solidly behind it. Right. I mean, we're due for it, Scott and Bill, but I don't know when it's going to happen.
Yeah, it really does kind of make you wonder a little bit. You got a beautiful facility. They built it downtown. It's a multi-purpose stadium, and now they don't have one. I know that obviously it's a popular thing in the area anyways in terms of hockey town. So it really...
Well, here are the other ancillary things that we're not talking about is, hotel space. Are there hotel rooms within a particular radius? I would gather to say no. They're probably looking for, George mentioned it, build up the District Detroit, and that's also include building some hotels that make it much easier to get to. I mean, you go to some cities on the circuit, and you literally walk from your hotel to the rink. And you don't do that in Detroit. It's not feasible. But you're in Nashville, you're literally across the street. I loved Nashville. I'm trying to think what other city we never had to take a bus to the game. That's beautiful. I mean, that's just convenient for fans to be able to do that. Pittsburgh was another one. You just literally were across the street from the arena. So it'd be nice to see if they can get some hotels in that district. It would make it much easier for these leagues to say, yes, we'll come and we'll hold the draft and we'll have the All-Star game here in town too.
Yeah.
And so, Bill, with that said, okay, let's talk about District Detroit. Okay, do you feel that? I know they talked about it when they were Mike Ilitch and everyone was building it. Do you feel that it's really lagged a little behind in terms of what the projections really were? Because obviously that's a hotly contested situation over there. I know when you build a new arena, everybody talks about activity around. Some of them are more progressive than others.
If you go back to when Comerica Park was built, they talked about this Wrigleyville that they were going to bring, this Wrigleyville vibe that they were going to bring to Comerica Park, and it never came to fruition. Now, is there some housing down there? Certainly. It's taken a long time. I mean, George, when was that ballpark finished? 2000?
2000, first year.
Yeah, you're talking 22 years now. And there really still is. You go down there, and the stores are closed. The bars there's not a lot of activity. Now I'm not a nightlife guy anymore, and maybe I'm missing the boat. But it doesn't have that same vibe that LA has with Nokia right next door, or Philadelphia has with the Xfinity experience. But I think these were things that they had promised. They were going to bring people back into the community, whether it was with condos and apartments and nightlife and grocery stores, parks. I'm still waiting to see all that get done. This was the grand plan. I mean, even when you think of the original schematics and the drawings of the building itself, coming off the Sochi Olympics, they were supposed to have a big LED lit up roof for Little Caesars Arena, and they scrapped that plan. And at one point, the Belfour Center, which is next door, which is the practice facility, Ilitches were going to scrap that until Ken Holland said, no, you can't, because I need to promise this to free agents, because the Wings would dress and drive. That was practice, dress and drive to City Arena or Liggett School to go practice, and then drive back in their cars in sweaty, wet equipment. Well, what free agent wants to know that? So they were going to scrap that plan to build that practice facility right on site, and Kenny went to the Ilitches and said, please don't. I'm not going to be able to sign guys. So there were all these plans, right? And some came through, a lot didn't. And so it'd be interesting to see, here in the next 2, 5, 10 years, is this place really going to get built up? It is interesting to note, though, that the Mike Ilitch Business School got finished, which is also
that didn't take long at all to build.
No.
Bill and Scott, and of course Wayne State University did have a lot to do with that. But I agree with you, Bill. A lot was promised, and Scott, in this Detroit district, and the little villages, and different little not little, but I mean, buildings that would comprise that. And then I don't know what it was. I mean, they started seeing dollar signs with these parking lots, and they control all this parking. After they bought all those buildings, they bulldozed so many of them. Now, I am glad that thanks to our preservationists, the Eddystone was saved. And I do have to commend the Ilitches. They've done a very nice job that has turned into housing. The Eddystone building there, a very historic building. But that wasn't until they got taken to court, and they says, wait a minute, you can't take both these. Remember that, Bill? There were two buildings side by side.
Yes.
And they compromised a bit and said, okay, well, we'll save the Eddystone, and then it sat there. Well, thank goodness now that's been completed, but there's so many other things, like you guys said, that were promised. And I mean, I know the economy took a hit, and there are a lot of factors involved in this, and it's not all the Ilitch's fault, but the city of Detroit gave them a lot of breaks, a lot of tax breaks.
Sure did.
Yeah, and the taxpayers did, yeah.
So why wasn't the other hotel saved? I don't know. I mean, you had two of them. Don't you think that might have alleviated the housing situation had you have been able to keep both of them instead of the one? That kind of shocks me a little bit. That was there. Obviously, fix one up, Bill, but not the other. I mean, because you're still back in the same thing. We're providing housing, blah, blah, blah. And yet one went down, the other one didn't. That, to me, and then you're talking about knocking a historical building down anyways.
And who knows what the infrastructure was in that building? Was it feasible to say? I don't know.
Yeah.
Was it feasible to save? Were there too many issues where it couldn't be saved? I don't know. I can't speak to that.
All right. Well, that's fair. Okay. So, all right. Final thoughts here. Okay. So as we look at the Yzer plan, because I know that's being talked about right now, Bill, we'll lead off with you. Is the Yzer plan on schedule? Because we know that Steve Yzerman has made a lot of shrewd decisions. He sent Anthony Mantha out, got a decent return. It seems like he knows how to get a good return on a lot of these guys. And do you think that the Red Wings will be active in the free agency period, knowing that the draft is behind them? What do Red Wings fans have in store for what this offseason could look like based on the Yzer plan before we wrap her up?
Yeah, it's interesting to view Twitter these days. Because they think they're going to get Malkin and Kopp, and I caution some of these fans did not get too carried away. Now he has $31 million apparently in projected cap space, but I don't think he's going to spend it all. There's no sense in spending it all. He's got a very young core group of guys. They're all in their early to mid 20s. there's no reason not to believe that Steve's plan is not on track. That it is on track. Time will tell with these young guys. Well, how is this going to play out? What's he going to do with that defensive core? That's kind of the Achilles heel, I think, right now. I think he addressed his goaltending needs during the draft with that trade. But defensively, what's he going to do? Is he going to bring back Mark Stahl? Is he going to bring back Danny DeKeyser? I don't know that those two guys particularly, not to say that they're not good locker room guys, that they're not good leaders, but I don't know if they're going to give you the production and the defense that you need out of those top 6 D-men. Does he go after a defenseman come Wednesday? I don't know. The Blackhawks have not tenured a couple guys. Does he go after those guys? Does he go after Dylan Strome? I would like him better than some of these other ideas. Kopp, I think, is going to end up in New York. It's funny, before, actually throughout today, you see all these names just kind of falling off the list as they stay with their own teams and they get their long tenure. So I don't know who's going to be available. Does he make a trade? Who knows? We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But I love if Verona can stay healthy this year. I think this guy is your next 40-goal scorer here in Detroit. I mean, we haven't had one of those in forever. In fact, we haven't had many 30-goal scorers for that matter.
Yeah, well, I mean, I like Jacob Verana, I like Dylan Larkin, Tyler Bertuzzi, Maurice Sider, and then you have Lucas Raymond. So the core is there. If you can get some solid goaltending, and we'll find out about Lalonde. I think these are interesting. George, some final thoughts before we go ahead and give everybody a chance.
Well, yeah, I mean, Bill had mentioned earlier, I mean, since he left the organization and, that 6-year, 5-year plan, and now it just keeps dragging on. But again, we have to realize that Holland left and Yzerman entered the picture. So yes, I think most fans will give Stevie the benefit of the doubt. I mean, he was I always will be a folk hero here in Detroit. As far as administratively, he seems to have surrounded himself with some pretty decent people.
Mm-hmm.
And Bill, you hit it you nailed it. I mean, defense, they've got to shore up that defense. But do I see them going out and spending a whole lot of money? Like you said, all that cap money, I doubt it. I think he's being fiscally responsible to Chris Ilitch. I think that Chris will let him, just like he let Avila, pick up a few guys in the offseason and spend a little bit of money. I mean, where they feel it's necessary. But it's still a few years away till they can contend in the whole season, I was meant to say, not just half a season. But I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. I think the plan is working to some extent so far.
Well, I'm sure we'll find out as time goes on. All right. With that said, Bill, why don't you let everybody know how I'll be curious to monitor the whole thing. We'll be doing more Red Wing broadcasts over the next several months here on Fire Up Michigan. All right, Bill, thanks for being with us. And I want you to let everybody know how they get a hold of you. George and I will wrap up the show with you on real quickly. So go ahead, Bill. The floor is yours.
You can find me at Twitter at Bill_Roose, ROOSE.
Very good. All right, George Eichhorn, you have some.
You can find me at SNG Sports 99 and also on LinkedIn. My name, George Eichhorn, search on that. And also I'm the author of a book called Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air, which is available, a link from the South Florida Tribune website. And the book is still available for $19.99. And Scott is in the book along with Bruce Martin, Bud Lynch, Ken Kell, Ken Daniels, Mickey Redmond, a whole bunch of Red Wing announcers I interviewed. But it's a good reading material. And Scott, you're part of it, and we appreciate that too.
Well, no problem. Well, like I said, George Eichhorn appears on a lot of our shows here as well. So with that said, in terms of you can subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. So once again, you go to YouTube, go to South Florida Tribune, please subscribe, no charge to do so, or visit us at www.southfloridatribune.com or follow us on Twitter at Tribune South. To advertise, call 954-304-4941. The audio portion of the show can be heard on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. I also want to point out that Candy Epling does an outstanding job on our platform, making sure all the content gets up there as well, both not only the broadcast side, but as well as the written content. So great show here up on Fire Up Florida. We had Mark Mancini, obviously had other responsibilities to take care of, but no problem. We have George Eichhorn and myself and Bill Roos as well. So we hope you've enjoyed this edition of Fire Up Michigan, and we look forward to catching you on the next episode. Take care, everybody. And once again, shout out to my co-hosts, Mark Mancini, George Eichhorn, and Bill Roos. Have a good night, everybody.